Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Welcome to We All Serve, a podcast series brought to you by Arizona Employer Support of the Guard and Reserved. Today's topic is the power of volunteerism. I'm your co-host and moderator, Mike Phillips. I'd like to introduce our other co-host, Dan Irving, the Arizona chairman for ESGR.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I just want to say I'm really excited about being here today because we are going to highlight our volunteers. We're going to talk about how they work with the employers and Guard and Reserve members and what all they do to make us so successful and get our mission accomplished. So I'm looking, it's going to be a great, discussion.
I agree, Dan. I'm excited about it. And before we get to our guests, I'd like to thank Karen Nowicki and Phoenix Business RadioX for their ongoing support of this podcast series. We appreciate all the work you do to make these conversations possible. Thank you, Karen. Now on to our guests. It's my pleasure to introduce Mitch Wetzel, a longtime ESGR volunteer and the program manager for small and disadvantaged businesses at Tri-West Healthcare Alliance. Good morning, Mitch.
Good morning, Mike.
Also with us today is Scott Essex, who, after a career in banking, began volunteering with ESGR way back in 1989. Scott has chaired the Arizona State Committee, served on the National Outreach Subcommittee, and today holds a staff position to support Arizona volunteer activities within ESGR. Good morning, Scott.
Good morning, Mike.
Dan, let's kick off the discussion today. For those new to the podcast, tell us a little bit about ESGR and why volunteering is so important to the success of its mission.
Okay, sure. So ESGR is a program under the Department of Defense, and there's about a little over 4,000 volunteers and staff members that complete the mission. And one of the things that we do, and we are we support the employer by being a liaison between the employer and Department of Defense. We look at relative initiatives that support the employer or the Guard and Reserve members, and we take that up forward. That's one of the things we do. But what we really do is we work to try to get a culture within the employer to where it fosters the support and the encouragement of their military members to support them in the Guard. Now, Guard and Reserve. Now, why that's important, over 50% of our service today takes up Guard and Reserve, 50% of our service. So in order to have a viable, sustainable force, it's important that the employers support and encourage that participation from their employers that are in the Guard and Reserve. That's a key. So it's extremely important. So what we do is we go in and we do this through education, recognition. We recognize those employers that are outstanding. We do mediation. We have a mediation service. So if there's a problem between the employer and the service member, we can go in and mediate. And everything we do is at no charge to the employer or the service member. This is totally free. We don't sell anything. We're there to support the employers. We're there to support the Guard and Reserve. And we do it through these initiatives and these programs that we have in ESGR, which we'll probably talk a little bit more as we go on here, but I'll just end it at that right now.
Thanks, Dan. Scott, Ronald Reagan was president when you began volunteering with ESGR. I don't know if you remember that or not, but you've been here a long time. You've done a lot of different things. What attracted you to the organization, and what keeps you going after more than 30 years?
Well, organizations go through different lifestyles or life changes. And it was about the time that I came on that ESGR was revamping and redirecting itself. And I was in another organization and with some other volunteers. And one of the volunteers was the gentleman who kind of chaired the central region, the Maricopa County, for the ESGR. And he came up to me and said, hey, I'm looking for a liaison to work with the 161st Air Refueling Wing. You want to come on and do this? And he explained it to me, and started doing that. And I tell you, a lot of the people that are in the Guard and Reserve are people you really want to know. And not only are they good employees, but they're great neighbors. And everybody down at the 161st was just so fun to be around.
And that's a local based air unit, right?
It is. It's an air refueling unit. Most people wouldn't even see it, but it's on the south side of Sky Harbor. And over the years, they've put a big building up there. You can see it says Copperheads, and you'll see there are 8 to 12 tankers that are out there at any one time. But by tanker, I mean it's a KC-135 jet. They were built in the 1950s, but still are running perfectly because they don't have the flight hours that a normal plane would have. And the people are, once you get here at the 161st, the service members stay. And so they know those machines from top to bottom.
And they're out there working with units all over the Southwest almost every day, right? I mean, that's a significant part of our national security, that air base out there.
It is. There aren't that many refueling wings, and so the 161st will cover the entire Southwest. They'll go up into and actually work with the different units, the wings, fighter wings, different, whether it's Army helicopters or Navy jets or helicopters or the big AWACS. They're able to refuel anything in the air.
And I just want to add something here because Scott failed to mention that Scott is ESGR. When people today think of ESGR, they think of Scott Essex. And I'll tell you why. I met Scott back in '89, somewhere in that area at the 161st. I was a member there at the time, and Scott was always there. He was always taking care of our airmen, and he just went around and talked to people. And I just wanted to point that out because you are, when people, I've talked to people. Is Scott? Should we call Scott? Yeah, you can call Scott. I'm just the chair, but you can call Scott. But he is the eyes. He is the face of ESGR, and that really says a lot for Scott because he's out there. The employers all know him. The Guard members know him, and that's what we expect from our volunteers. Our volunteers that go out there and talk to these employers and talk to these service members, that's the type of relationship that they have. It's a strong relationship. It really is. And we're there to help them once they realize that that's what we're really there to do. A lot of times when the government comes in and says, we're here to help you, may not be quite the help you're looking for, but we truly are there to help the employers, the service members, and their families. So, Scott, I want to thank you for that because you're still doing it here, 30 some years later?
Well, and it started out when I first started doing it in '89, and then it was 10 years later in 1998. I retired from banking and then was able to have a lot of time. And so it worked out extremely well that I wasn't trying to balance a job and then volunteer in the moments that I could. I could do anything every day, all day with ESGR.
And you focused on ESGR, like you said. You had a lot of other volunteer activities going on, but you were drawn to ESGR. And just to spend a couple moments talking about that. What was that instant attraction that you had with this organization?
Well, the ESGR has a great mission that it's trying to accomplish, and there are a lot of times that service members really do need to have some support. For the people who don't know, the ESGR started in 1972 because military members would go off for training or go off to duty, and they came back and they didn't have a job. And so that was the whole initiative for starting ESGR, was so that when they came back, they had a job to come back to. And over the years, we found that you can do a lot more when you have good communications, and there's an inverse number when you look at how many problems are there out there versus how much do you talk with employers. And the more you talk, the less problems there are. Because why they make up half of the Army, as Dan was, or the Army, the
military.
The military. There's only, when you look at it from the standpoint of how many employers are making sure that these people are available, it's between 15 and 20% of the nation's employers. So there's 80% of the employers that do not have a Guard or Reserve member. So it's really, really important to, number one, make sure that we keep things as good as we possibly can, the relationships with those employers. And in addition to that, branch out so that we have a larger base. I know General McGuire talks to you a lot about we need more employers.
That is correct, yes.
It's not just civilian employers either. It's state, municipal, county employers as well. School teachers, police officers, firefighters, you name it. So we're reaching out to those employers as well. They're very, very important as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Mitch, like Dan, you spent a career in the reserves, then got involved in ESGR. Talk to us a little bit about your experiences with ESGR and how ESGR assisted you along the way when you were in the military.
Mike, I served for 30 years in the Marine Corps Reserve Unit here in Phoenix. Eventually wound up being out at Luke Air Force Base, but I retired after 30 years as a CW04. And my first engagement with ESGR was when I was the operations and training officer. And as Dan was saying, we're 50% of the military, versus the active duty. And with that said, we have to do the same mission that an active duty unit does in 30 days. We have to do it on 1 week in a month. So our training schedules are cram packed. We had to, administrative stand downs, weapons qualifications, all the things, training things you have to get done to be certified as a deployable unit, and squishing that into 1 weekend a month. And then I get a command request that we need to squeeze in a 30-minute briefing with ESGR. I'm like, how am I going to do that? But it was important that we did do that we get our annual brief from the ESGR folks, letting the Guard and Reserve members know what their rights are under USERRA, the reemployment rights when they go off for training or for deployments. But it was really critical, before Desert Storm, when we had been deployed. And when we got back, we were able to, get with our employers. I eventually became a company commander of the unit and deployed during Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003. And we were able to lean on our partners at ESGR to get any kind of reemployment decisions made, or help the employers know that, hey, we just deployed for 6 months and we need to make sure these guys and gals are all coming back to jobs like Dan was saying and Scott was saying, that they have to have reassurances their jobs are going to be there when they get back.
So that's a real personal connection. If somebody's life is really taking an unexpected turn, they're going overseas, they're actually going into a combat environment, and they've got somebody back home that's kind of got their back.
Yep.
I could see how.
And I would also say that we're ESGR Arizona, but we also partner with our other Western states. We have relationships with New Mexico and California ESGR. My son, both my sons are currently serving in the Marine Corps. One's on active duty and one's in the reserves. My oldest son serves in a reserve unit in New Mexico. So we have a relationship with the New Mexico ESGR. So because a lot of these units, so a lot of the reserve and guard members travel out of state to go to their drill weekends too. So that's why the employers need to know that they've had to drive 8 hours to the drill weekend, Sunday night, and they report in on Monday. They're not probably need to be given a little bit of a break on when they return to work. But yeah, we have a good relationship with all the Western state ESGR chapters as well.
And Dan, you spent 30 years in the Air Guard, and again, contacted or had a relationship with the ESGR for a long time. Talk to us about how important that was for you.
Well, it was extremely important, not so much for me itself, but for my service members that were under me, because I was a full timer, so I worked for the Department of Defense, so I didn't have to worry about it so much. But I can tell you that our traditional airmen, they had a lot of problems with employers, and I've had good people get out of the Guard because of their employer. And when you say, "Well, why don't you let's call ESGR and let's see if we," "Nope, I'm just done with it. It's good money. I need the money to support my family. I don't want to make waves." And they'll get out of the Guard, and we lose very talented professional people. One of the things that we can do, one of the things that we do, and Mitch and you all know this, but what we'll do is we'll work with employers like that, and we'll bring them in to some of our events that we have, maybe a boss lift or something like that. Get them in front of the military commanders, get a military brief, kind of let them see what service members do when they're not working for them, right? So they get an idea what that's all about. And I'll tell you, we've had a lot of success with our boss lifts, taking them up on a 3-hour KC-135 ride, seeing in-flight refueling, the breakfast with the bosses where we bring commanders in and let them talk to commanders. There's a lot of things we can do to help our service members in that regards, but we're also mindful that even though our military, when they deploy, when our Guard and Reserve members deploy, a lot of times they might get 3 days notice. Sometimes they get 6 months. It just depends on where they're going in the mission. Well, we have to keep in mind that their families, right? They worry about their families. There's a lot of things that they have to worry about. Well, what our volunteers do by working with our employers is, again, trying to foster that culture where they support them, because that's the last thing we want our service members leaving worrying about a job to come back to. And I got to tell you, we have got some really good employers in Arizona. And for example, a lot of the hospitals and stuff, they'll support spouses of members that are deployed. And we also give them awards for that also. There's a Spouse Patriot Award that we can give for that. So there's a lot of things we can do, but that's how we kind of support. That's how our volunteers go out and they talk with the employers. They get them to understand. If you remember back when, if I'm kind of an old guy, so I remember back when we used to have bases everywhere. So the communities always saw uniforms. They always had. There was always a military presence. Okay, with the BRAC closures, and they closed a lot of bases and stuff down. What happened? Well, bases closed. People don't see that anymore. They've kind of not been tied to the military. So one of the key things that our volunteers do is make that connection. They make the connection, and we pull them in so that they understand. And you guys have been at these things. How many times have we said, when we start talking about the benefits of hiring a Guard and Reserve to an audience of employers, and we start talking about the drug program, the random drug test, the PT exercise, the security clearances, we have hands going up because they're very much interested. They don't know this. So it's up to our volunteers, and that's what we do. We go in and we educate them on that, as well as the laws and policies. But you know, we kind of give them that sense that, hey, these are professional leaders.
Yeah, you make some great points there. There's been a lot of buzz and a lot of conversation, I think, nationally about how the military has kind of taken a step away from regular civilian life. I mean, it's not part of everybody's daily experience. And you talked about the shutdown of the bases, and ESGR really is a bridge to that culture. Uh, Educating businesses and the community about the importance of the Guard and Reserve, and also assisting Guard and Reserve members to in their civilian careers. Talk a little bit, and Scott, you're probably the perfect guy to talk about this. The emotion and experience when somebody gets recognized for their support.
Yeah, let me do that. But first, I want to just comment a second about your use of the word bridge. And ESGR has been designed with the volunteers being the face of the organization. And there are a couple of different volunteers. There are people like yourselves, Mike and Mitch, that have been in the, well, Dan too. All of you been in the military and then now have civilian jobs. And so there are others that retired out of the military and then hadn't done anything else. And then there are some people that have never been in the military. And so as we create this bridge, it's great to have volunteers who understand the military side, and they can go in and do the unit briefs and understand all the protocols and the things that are going on. But it's as important to have volunteers who are either out of the military and now in a civilian job, or have never been in the military, because they can talk with the employers. And there's a different language with each group. So it's great to have a mix of volunteers, and it's important to provide the service that we need to do for those service members, and we need both types of volunteers. Going out as a volunteer and going to a police department, or going to any regular company, a lot of times the award that you were starting to talk about, and now I'm back to your question, is the Patriot Award. And the service members, we as ESGR love a Patriot Award, because it's the nominator is a service member, and the nominator saying, my employer is just above and beyond in giving me support. I'd like to do something nice to recognize them. And so a lot of times,
Usually it's their direct supervisor.
yeah, their direct supervisor, most often. And then, I've been to companies where I made 7 presentations of Patriot Awards in one day, because there was one for the supervisor and one for the supervisor's supervisor, because everybody knew that you had to have the next level up to be able to get this done. And so there were those 2 awards for supervisors, and then they gave 5 awards to their colleagues, their coworkers, because something has to happen when they leave, and the coworkers either have to pick up the workload, or they have to get used to a new person who's been brought in to fill that void and do what the service member was doing now, and now they're gone. So, and everybody, whether you give it to a supervisor or to a coworker, the looks on their faces, because it's usually a surprise. You walk in and you say, "Hi, I'm with the Employer Support of the Guard and Reserve," and people are going, "I don't think we're in trouble, right?" And then and you say, "Well, that's part of it. If there are problems, we're here to help. But I'm here on the other side today, because we also get to do the fun things and recognize employers for doing wonderful things, and that's why I'm here today." And everybody just gets into the mood. It's a wonderful thing to watch.
It is, and it doesn't matter if it's a big company or a small company. Just a quick story. I had one that we had to deliver, and it was at a house. And I thought, wow, this is at a house? Okay. Small business, very small business. It was run out of a house over in Gilbert. And the service member was gone, deployed for 12 months, was the foreman of a construction site company. Anyway, he scheduled it for the guys to be, it was in the summer, so he scheduled it for the guys to be over there on a Saturday. So I went over, and I had the box with the Patriot Award in it, and I had it in a white box that they come in. And I'm holding it in my hand, and the boss comes to the door, and he goes, "Oh, are you the pizza guy?" I said, "No, I'm not, but can I come in? I've got something I've got to talk to you about." And of course, they didn't know anything. So I presented the award in the kitchen. They were wearing flip-flops and bathing suits. So we took a picture, and it was kind of funny, because the picture, I'm, of course, dressed up, and they're in their flip-flops and bathing suits and beers. But so it just really depends. But in every case, and I think, Mitch, you guys have seen this, and I know Scott has, these supervisors don't want to put those down. They'll hold them through the whole time you're there. They don't want to put them down. I tried to grab one because he was going to talk. I said, "Well, you want me?" "No, I'll hold it." It means that much to them, and it goes a long ways, especially that the service member was the one who nominated. It just means so much. And as I said before, spouses can also do that for a deployed member. So,
Yeah, I got to say, I've been doing ESGR for a couple of years as a volunteer, and have had opportunities to present a few Patriot Awards, and it really is magical. The emotion that you see and the bonds that you see between an employer and an employee, and that recognition that comes unexpectedly, and then they reflect on just the difficult times when the guard or reserve member had to leave, and the employer had his back, and took care of his family, and made sure that connection was intact, and that dialogue was taking place while they were away, and that to me is priceless for a volunteer. You get to play a small role in that recognition, and it's pretty cool. Mitch, you've part of your volunteer activity is outreach to businesses. You want to talk a little bit about that? What that entails, and how you kind of make this whole thing work?
Yeah, it's probably one of the best things of the role that I'm in is engaging with small businesses, like Dan was saying, to Fortune 500 companies, to municipal organizations. Recently, we just Dan went up to Prescott and awarded the Freedom Award to Prescott Fire, and he could talk more about that, his experience up there. But it's the broad spectrum of employers that are out there that I engage with on a daily basis of informing about what ESGR does, and awarding Patriot Awards. I'm sorry, Patriot Awards. But a couple of the events that we have every year to get an employer engagement in is we host a boss breakfast with the boss. It's where we invite employers of all sizes, all shapes and sizes, to come out to usually host it at the 161st uh, Chow Hall down there at Sky Harbor. And we bring in the employers and we give them a presentation, bring donuts and coffee, of course. But we give them a presentation about what ESGR does, and like Dan was saying, let them know that their employees are valuable to the military, to our national defense. But that we recognize that they're also valuable to them as well. And we let them know about what we do, what they do, and set it up for twice a year. We have a boss lift with the 161st, which what Scott was talking about, where we take employers up on the flights, the refueling flights. We usually refuel the training wing out at Luke Air Force Base, the F-35 training wing, and it's part of the training mission. They have to certify that they can do a aero refueling as part of their training. So we're part of that. It's a real mission, and you could see the eyes widen when they see an F-35 fly up, within about 8 feet of the wingtip of the refueler, and it's I've never seen anybody come off that flight with a sad look on their face. It's usually very Scott was saying, it's a great group of people to work with, professionals. It's just really it's a good way to bridge the employers with what their service members are doing. Yeah, when I was back in the 80s and 90s, I believe worked with a shirt and tie on Friday night, and by Saturday morning at 1 or 3 in the morning, I'd be in cami paint on my face, sitting ambushing my fellow Marines, in an ambush, so, and then coming, Sunday, you clean your weapons, and then, Monday morning, show back at work, and your boss didn't even know what you did that weekend, but they just know you were tired and you still had cami paint behind your ear.
exactly.
But it's just a way to engage, and like I think the words have been said a couple times now, is to bridge the service member, the Guard and Reserve service member, with their employers.
And a lot of the employers that get involved with this are brought in to whatever the event is, whether it's a breakfast with a boss or whether it's a boss lift. They're brought in by the volunteers. They're the people that have the connections, and can reach out and say, "Hey, have you ever been on a KC-135 tanker?" and bring the people in. And a lot of times we end up getting some great new relationships with employers. But it's all centered on those volunteers going out. And the one thing we haven't really said, the ESGR, when we go back to the Department of Defense, nationwide, our volunteers provide over $40 million worth of of service to the Department of Defense. They go on I think it's $21 an hour that it's figured out. And so if you start to do the math on this, $21 an hour is a lot of volunteer hours to get to 40 million.
And Dan, in Arizona, being the chair, you're kind of the orchestra conductor to this operation. Talk a little bit about where your areas of focus is on, especially in the context of COVID-19. A lot of things have changed, and I know it's keeping you busy.
You know what? First off, we have really good leadership in our committee, okay? And so that really helps. Our focus, though, has always been on employers. We focus on employers. We do really good with the military side. We have plenty of military briefers. We go in there. We know what we need to brief them. We educate them. We educate them on the responsibilities under the law, because it's important. Because the law wasn't just written for the service member; it was also written to protect the employers. So there's responsibilities on both sides. So we have to go in and brief them annually on their responsibilities, and we're doing that. That's great. That's good. We're probably going to go virtual on that, because now they're doing virtual drills because of COVID. So we're probably going to do that. Do that more. You're going to see more virtual. Now, the thing that we are discussing now is a way forward to get to the employers, because we can do virtual meetings with them. We could do that, but it's not the same as in-person networking and having different groups in front of you from different organizations. So we're going to have to take a good hard look at that. But the biggest bang for the buck really is getting these employers on board to realize what the service members, Guard and Reserve, bring to the table. They all know what veterans bring, okay? But there's a big difference between veterans. And when I talk to employers, they all can tell you how many veterans they have. But when you say, how many Guard and Reserve do you employ, they don't know. It's like deer in the headlights, because they just don't track it. But it's really important for them to track that, because the Guard and Reserve member still has that obligation. They could go at moment's notice, whether it's state emergency. The Guard now, I'll talk about the Guard first. Guard has two missions. They have that state emergency for fires, the COVID, border mission, things like that. Then they can also be called up federally by the president. The reserves are federal, okay? And both of them now have been deployed overseas since 9/11, numerous times. So sooner or later, our employers are going to get stressed. And that's one of the things that I know a lot of the military leaders are concerned about, is at what point are the employers going to get so stressed that, they're not going to want to do this anymore and hire Guard and Reserve. Because I can tell you that there's Guard and Reserve members here in the state of Arizona, Army National Guard especially, that have deployed 4 and 5 times. So, and that's 12 months. So, I mean, it's a big strain, for the organizations. Bigger organizations can handle it. Little organizations is ones we try to really help and get in there, because they need that help. Because when that member comes back, they have to have a place for them. And so my focus going forward is, how do we really, connect the employers to the military and get that culture going where, hey, we want to hire Guard and Reserve and we want to support them 100%. We also want to encourage them to do their required duty. Okay. Most of them, I got to say, we have some good employers here. They take care of spouses when their members are deployed. We have a lot of Freedom Award winners in this state. Mitch had already mentioned the Prescott Fire, who we just had. But there's a lot of organizations in the state that have won that award. These awards are DoD awards. So
yeah, talk a little bit about that.
Very prestigious.
That's the top
That's
award.
From the Secretary of Defense. That is a big award. There was, I want to say, 2,600 applicants or nominees that went up to the national level. And out of that, they whittled it down to, I believe, 60 or 30 that went to the Department Secretary of Defense for a final decision for 15. So each year they do 15. one small business, one government entity, and then one large business. So that's how that works. So it's very prestigious. And as a matter of fact, we're starting to take nominations right now. So we're in the process of working for this year's, or next year's, I should say, Freedom Award winner.
And that information is available on the ESGR website, right?
That is, yes, it is.
Which is a great resource. If you have any questions or want to get more information about ESGR, the website is terrific. You just Google ESGR, the website will pop up there with the link, and go there, and there's a ton of resources on it. And we've been talking about volunteerism is the topic of this show. It's really the lifeblood of so many organizations, including ESGR. If you want to volunteer, Dan or Scott, talk a little bit about the reward someone gets from pitching in, what they can do, what type of activities they can do with ESGR, and how to get involved.
Go ahead, Scott. You start off.
All right, sir. You got it.
Okay.
We've touched on some of the things. Going in and giving an award to a supervisor, it is a fun thing to do. And there are volunteers who come in on with the ESGR and say, that's all I want to do. I just want to go out and give people awards, and everybody's really happy. It's a fun thing to do. I want to do that. And so that's one of the things. They get a good feeling from that. They also, as they help a service member with whatever it is, and normally if there's a problem with an employer, 80% of the time it's one phone call, and the employer is grateful because we're trying to help them. We've been doing this since 1972, and our volunteer, who's somebody in the community that they may already know, is coming to them going, look, here's what happens if we continue down this way. And I don't want to see you in that position. So let me help you get out of it. And we've ended up getting volunteers from companies that we've helped with an ESGR or USERA issue. And the relationship builds to where they then send us people as volunteers. So it's a great thing to do that way. But the volunteers also, they get to do fun things like, with the breakfast with the boss.
The military outreach volunteers get to go do the annual briefings at the Guard and Reserve units. And one of the things we've done since technology has evolved is Dan's very good at this. He tells them to all the Guard and Reserve members during the briefing, break out your phones. All right, go to the website. Go ahead and nominate your employer, or how many of you are employed. They raise their hands. All right, get your phone out, nominate your employer. Right there online. Right during the briefing. So that's one of the things. Benefits that we get to do when we're doing our military outreach briefings.
And also this COVID, it's also challenging with our volunteers right now because of COVID. As you heard, everybody wants to go out and get in front of the Guard and Reserve members. They want to get in front of the employers. They want to do the breakfast with the bosses, the boss lifts, the base tours, and whatever other activities we do. The problem with COVID right now, it's got our hands tied. And so trying to, our volunteers are getting a little bit, they don't know what direction we're going because they can't do what they love to do. So that's one of the problems that we have right now, one of the challenges. And also we have an older force. We have an older volunteer group, and a lot of folks don't want to do the viral stuff. So that's going to be a challenge going forward for us. But we'll survive. We'll get that all figured out. But I just want to say, volunteers, we have volunteers from all over all walks of life, all over. You don't have to have military experience to be a volunteer. We have folks that never were in the military that are some of our best volunteers, especially with employers.
Pick me. I was never in the military.
Yeah, that's true. Scott's done this. He had no military background, but he's an expert today. So, and we love having him on board. But we have a saying, we all serve. And this is how we serve. Everybody serves in a different capacity. And so we have volunteers, and I'm always asking people to volunteer. We try to, one of the things we try to do, like Freedom Award winner, right? We'll try to get some volunteers out of these organizations that have been awarded and are doing some good things. For example, I had an organization ask me about an affinity group, a veterans affinity group. How do we get something like this going? Well, you know what? APS has one. We have 3 volunteers from APS. They're willing to share. We can connect them with the company, and they can set up their Infinity group for veterans. So there are things that you can do. We have others like the town of Gilbert has a ESGR wall where they have in their lobby of their chambers where they have their meetings. They have a wall, glass shelving with all their awards and pictures of their service members. And it just shows the support that the town gives. And so we try to get volunteers from all over the place. And that's something that I've had some disagreements with folks. So some folks says, no, you got to have military background. You really don't. Okay. ESGR is open for anybody who would like to be a volunteer. You just need to contact us, and we can certainly put you through an orientation and
Dan,
start
you
working.
might talk about how we divided the state up too. How we've got central, so you don't have to travel.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point because, we have about 60 volunteers right now. I wouldn't say they're all active with COVID. Like I said, we've kind of slowed down the last several months. But we've got 4 regions. So we have a northern, we have a central, we have a southern, and then we have a western. And so western is down in Yuma. South, of course, is the Tucson area. The central is the largest, which is here in Maricopa County. And then we also have the northern, which takes care of anything from Havasu to
Prescott Flag.
Show Low, Prescott. So they run all over. They'll even do the Navajo Nation.
Yeah, we were talking about bridges and connections, and this is really it's not only a statewide organization, but it's really one of the few organizations that bridges all across the 5 services. We have representation in all the armed services, and there's not a lot of organizations that do that. A lot of the services can be somewhat insular sometimes, but ESGR is one of those organizations that reaches out to everyone, and they've got connections with everyone, and that's really, again, that's another healthy aspect of what ESGR does.
One of the things too that people, I get this question asked a lot too, because we have an ombudsman service, which does the mediation for us. And I've had people say, well, do you have to be an attorney or a lawyer to do that? And the answer is no, because you're given training. You go to the national, you get training, plus we do annual training once you come back. And you're very versed on USERRA law. And we do it simply on a mediation basis. So it's non-adversarial. We don't take sides. We don't take the service member sides. We don't take the employer side. We go in and we usually talk to HRs. And I would say probably 80% of the time, it's a misunderstanding and it can be resolved without any attorneys or anything. If you get attorneys involved, then we can't do anything. We have to back off. And if we can't resolve it, then it goes to the Department of Labor. And the Department of Labor has adjudication on it. So just a little something there. But we do have a volunteer crew. They're trained in ombudsman. They're the ones that do usually the USERRA briefs or the USERRA training for HRs, because we provide that service. We just did a big one, not this past year because of COVID, but the year before we did a big one out at Wild Horse Pass with the state SHRM. So we did a training out there on USERRA law. Just some of the things that we do to support our employers.
Yeah, and we've mentioned COVID several times in different contexts, but I don't know how many folks in the community know what the Arizona National Guard has done this year. They have been all over the state in response to some of the most vulnerable communities that we have, on Indian communities, border communities, rural mountain communities that really were hurting in terms of taxes on their healthcare system, the need for supplies, and into that breach goes the Arizona National Guard, and that's your neighbor, our members of our community out there on the front lines helping us in an emergency. It's pretty cool. And again, we're the organization that helps them have their back when they're out there doing their jobs, and that's a remarkable story. I think it will be told in more detail later this year as we are able to put COVID-19 in the rear view. You guys thank you so much for the conversation. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you, Karen and Phoenix Business Radio X, again for the opportunity to bring this conversation to the public. Is there anything you'd like to add about ESGR, your experiences with ESGR, what somebody should know about it if they're thinking about being a volunteer?
Well, the one thing that was mentioned before when you were talking about people who were trying to get help or just advice, and you said, we've got 3 volunteers from APS. And that seems to be what happens is one volunteer will come in and then they'll bring other people from their company. And so whether it's APS or whether it's TriWest, whether it's SRP, it seems like when we get one, we get another and then another. And I know there was a time there, I was also volunteering for the Tempe Diablos and the Fiesta Bowl. And I brought a number of volunteers from those organizations who really liked the ESGR mission and what we were doing. So if there's somebody who has that in their blood, it's real easy to switch over and do ESGR stuff. Like Dan said, you don't need to have a military career. I
No.
still don't know if I can spell military.
Now, one of the things, I'll just tell you a quick little story real quick. I believe we still have a little time. Right. Okay, let me give you a little story. So I think it was Mitch that told me about Mike.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, Mitch told me about Mike. So we really have had a real problem with our social media. One of the things we tried to do is we want to put our brand awareness out there. So we really want to concentrate on social media, but we really didn't have a volunteer that was really up on that kind of stuff. So Mitch told me about this guy that was working at Scottsdale, the city of Scottsdale, and he was the manager there of public affairs. And Mitch told me about it. And I happened to be watching TV, and I see this guy on Channel 3, and it's Mike Phillips. And I thought, Mike Phillips getting ready to retire. I got to call Mike Phillips. So I called Mike Phillips, and Mike and I had lunch. And we sat down and talked, and he was shocked. As much experience he has with Marine Corps and all the organizations he volunteers for, he had no idea what we did and how deep it was, right? And so we talked a couple times, I think, and Mike says, "Yeah, I want to come on board and I want to do this." And since then, he has really done a fantastic job on our social media. So we try, we also target. I won't say we do target some people every once in a while, but if you've got an expertise that can help, whether you can present, that's something that's always fun to do, is present an award. We teach you how to do all that. It's not something that you have to know. You go through some training with us, and we'll get you up to speed to be able to do that. But that's how it works. And so I got in because at the time, Darren Venner was the chair, and the central area didn't have a leader. They didn't have a leader for about a year and a half. And so he twisted my arm and told me he needed a leader, and I jumped in and did it. But I did it because I wanted to give back, because ESGR has been so good to the Guard and Reserve, to the airmen that I was in charge of. And so this is my way to give back. And and I enjoy doing it. I love what I do. And I think every volunteer will tell you the same thing. So I just want to throw that out there. Once you understand what we're all about and what we do for the employers and the service members, you're on board. I mean, we got you. So if you're interested, please give us a call. Go out to our website. There's a phone number you can call on the website, and you'll get Scott Essex. He will get you to the right people. Thank you.
Like us on Facebook and LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Thanks again, gentlemen. Great conversation.
Enjoyed it.